I'd like to ask you, what was the advantage for you stopping to play and starting to coach? Did you take over some advantages from your player's career? And so the first advantage the player has is if they realize, and I did realize, and I always thought to myself, I will never repeat the mistakes perpetrated by my coaches. I will never do that. I tried to do that during the first year and second year of my coach's career, but then you start doing some routines and forget about your aspirations in this effect. So it's much more complicated. I started to coach a team which was not at the top, but second highest league at that time, and the players or teammates actually knew me because I used to be a teammate, which is not easy for me because I knew the individual errors and mistakes and shortcomings, but you can work as a coach if you have sufficient authority. But of course, I had such experience, and I actually was a peer to them. But then I got to a stage when I had to decide to reinforce my authority by making such a radical step that I actually threw out a player from the team because she kept on thinking that she could still be my teammate, and she couldn't. She wasn't able to actually make a proper guess of that I was no longer her pal, and I was at a different level, so there was a difference between us. So I had to make a radical step, though she was one of the most talented players that we had on the team. So yeah, it makes a difference, and you can work like that if you have a natural authority and enjoy support from the club. People often talk about the fact what a coach can actually bring on from an experience, bring on players of their team. So what could you share? And did you actually, for those years, I had many players to deal with. In those years of my coach's career, and also I saw talented children who never made it, actually. They're like 14, 15-year-olds who received from junior teams when there were some quasi talents. And so one taught me when I asked her, for example, about some very trivial thing, do you eat vegetables at home? And she said, yes. Mom puts it out of the soup, or takes it out of the soup, and it's cooked. Well, that's how she meant it. And so you can start also to listen to those who are not so much talented, and you have to deal with the top stars also. So, that's a change in your career. Any other questions, please? Yeah, we should give them the mic. Let me go back to the stage of your career as player. In those days, thanks to Honza Kager and his brother, a revolutionary change was introduced in the physical practicing, and people started to do it on a scientific basis. And after all those years, and having now your experience that you have, do you still use that past experience or not? And if not, could you indicate at least some basic principles of condition practicing, physical conditioning practices? Well, I was a member of a generation. I didn't experience such myself that breakthrough period. So I was leaving the club at the time in Prague. So there's nothing I can go back to now. But with regards to physical preparation, when I started as a coach, I actually prepared everything for myself in Rosenberg town yesterday, and I have taken that to the current days, and I have minimum influence on physical condition preparation, because I have an expert for that. And the second reason, the classical preparation that used to be here after the 1 year of competition was over, there was a free 1 month, and so then we got back to practicing. It doesn't exist now for me, because the top teams meet after vacations period at end of August, for example. Some others maybe only in September. and there's a question mark about the situation. And then whether we should meet as late as early October. But I no longer do the physical preparations at the level of like ice hockey players who prepare at home and they go to some training camp and they actually go through the tactics. And so in my early days, now when I'm remembering that I did the preparation myself for the teams, so I started on the basis of various pieces of knowledge. I had to read many books from A to Z, and I used more or less in that town of Rožmberok. Actually, I made use of the surrounding nature where we spent much time, and so it was only a help for the physical preparation, but also mental preparation, because the weather was mostly not good in that region. And so I was reproached many times that, for example, players went running and there was 10 centimeters high layer of snow on the surface. But doing that, they were able to overcome obstacles, like even during matches, and some unpleasant things. And so they were able to cope with some bad moments. Let me just add, before we get some of the questions, so there's a written question concerning physical preparation. What do you prepare in physical preparation for the Euroleague teams, shorter or longer distance? What is meant by that is whether you prepare classical track and field preparation outside, long distances, long times, or some special condition training, for example, on the court. So I must say that when I was, some 20 years ago, when I was remembering the preparation in the town of Rožmberok, now it's entirely different, as we did running in the nature, out in the green and in the snow. So we don't do that any longer today. And so with regard to whether we have a fitness room, some shorter distances running, but some, long running, not that really, mostly, or they do some bicycle riding. And so it's some kind of a leisure time, more of that spirit, so it's not developing their stamina. So it's about maintaining the condition, but making mostly short distance basketball running. So, but the typical things that we did years ago were no longer now. Any other questions coming from the audience? If this is not the case, let me follow up to that. We are talking now about physical preparation, the building of top teams, no matter whether men or women. There are certain rules that must be applied. I'd like to hear what are all the questions that you take into account when selecting a team for the next season, depending on the contract and possibilities of the club. So do you take into account the age, posts on the floor, cultural background? So in top teams which want to get to Euroleague final form, you have to take into account all these things, because the decisive things come only later in autumn, that is October, November. Well, not everyone has the luxury to make their own selection of players in the top teams, because if the team spends 1 or 2 seasons in such a club, then there is some basis that has to take and build on that. The ideal situation is selecting your own players, and the team is created actually kind of to fit your ambition or aspiration. So you have to get some let's say human material, quote unquote, to work with. And if you once you get it, I have to realize I have that and that. I have XY players and etc. So I'm going to prefer zone pressing play or zone defense, and I have players of some other character, let's say, and I can have one-on-one defense all across the field. So I have to adjust to the characters of players. But if I have a possibility to make a choice, then I have to, of course, respect the rules. And it's a fact that in the top teams, everybody has some possibly 2 Americans, because this is allowed by the game laws of the games, mostly black-skinned girls that are actually irreplaceable because they have a high dynamism. And so this is such magnificent dynamic movement qualities that it's difficult to substitute them or to and so then I adhere to one principle. When I'm coaching a team which is from Prague, there should be some Czech players in that team. If I do coaching in Hungary, for example, the team should include Hungarians, so the team has its own identity, or let's say national identity. And then I can add also some foreign players, outsiders, so to say. And so the fans, when they watch the games, can identify themselves with the team. So it's not just a random collection of basketball ladies. So it's important, be it in Czech Republic, Czechia or Slovakia. It's a problem to find really top players that would be that would fit the let's say EuroLeague requirements and actually to build the bulk of the team. And also there's such a factor that in the team are these foreign players come, and then what happens is that the players form a domestic group and separate group of foreign players, and then it's important for both groups to be able to find their way to one another. So it should be actually, when you make couples, you have 2 Americans, 2 Serbians, 2 Czechs, 2 Slovaks. That would be bad to compose it like that. So you have to be able to resolve these issues patiently, and if you can manage to do that, then you can build teams.
Can I just ask you one more question, talking about the team chemistry? Do you use any particular out-of-court activities? Well, I know it's the buzzword, team building and bodybuilding and all the rest of it. These are very modern things. And I'm fond of saying that happens on the go at each practice. But I believe that if you tell them to do something, if you tell them directly it doesn't work, I think what really works is sort of hidden between the lines. If they learn without knowing, that's best, I guess. What nationality of players do you find the best to work with, or the easiest to work with? It doesn't really matter. I've gone through many countries, and I can't say I have a particular nation that I find easier or the easiest to work with. You know, there are difficult things in each national mentality, and many positive things as well. All right, over to our coaches. Do you have any question to ask over there? I'd like to ask you one question concerning what you said before. Is there any player that you met during your previous missions that you'd like to take on board? Well, Taurasi would be one of them. She loves basketball. She knows the ins and outs of basketball, and she's truly positive. She's a very positive person to work in the team and for the team. She can bring the mood up. She can turn things into fun, and she knows how to motivate others. I very often said, well, she always came to the practice session 20 or 30 minutes prior to the official beginning. She's really a hard-working person, and that's really interesting. When you work hard with these big stars, these people are the most hard-working blokes, really, the most hard-working players, without being told. That's what separates the men from the boys, so to speak. Of course, yes, they are terribly talented. They've got big talents. But I remember Taurasi was there 20, 30 minutes prior to the practice, she already had been there. Subert and Lauren Jackson, 3 players. They were friends, that's right. They were motivating each other, so to speak. But they were no 3 Russian players, no way. These 3 stars, big stars of basketball, were there before the practice. More questions? I'd like to go back to USK Prague. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the main pillar of USK Prague improving? In the previous periods, the previous seasons, there had already been stars, but you probably brought something new. Aggressive defense, maybe better development or whatever. Yes, that's the role of the coach, isn't it? Well, yes, the point guard, the new point guard is truly the person that leads, the player that leads, the leading player. She is the leader, not only on the floor, on the pitch, but also outside. Yes, we had to improve our defense. That's very important as well. That counts. And we used to be a highly offensive team, and we were able to play some matches where the opponent could not score 50 points against us, so it really meant we were able to improve our defense a lot. But apart from that, I believe let me call it energy, the positive energy was shared between us. We were supplying each other with lots of positive energy. And when you see the other person being really positive about what they are doing, and it boosts your morale, and it's shared within the team, and I believe that's where the role of the coach comes into play. You need to be able to share with the team the trust and the faith in your success. Great. Next question. If there's no question now, I'd like to... Okay, we do have a question there. Okay, go ahead. This is not the best place to sit. I'm next to the loudspeaker. Anyway, I wanted to ask whether USK Prague can actually benefit from the fact, also in the younger categories, that you are there as a coach, as a head coach, and you spend 4 or 6 hours a day on the floor, and I'm wondering whether you are passing your experience to the junior players, the junior national team players. Do you do workshops with them, etc.? Well, unfortunately not. Unfortunately, that is not happening, and I would have imagined that would have been different when I came to when I joined the team. I would expect there to be some sort of linkage between the junior and the senior level. I'm not saying this is not happening. This was not happening in the teams when I worked with abroad. But I would imagine that there should be a better link between the junior and the senior team here in the Czech Republic and the USK. USK Prague is a special case. If you had the B team, it would be great. I've always enjoyed working with young players. Those who played in the junior teams and then joined our team. Well, that's another task for me. That's on my to-do list. I want to make sure that there is a better link between the 2 levels. Let me put it this way. I can't influence what is happening on that front. It's not part of my remit, so to speak. I'd like to go back to what the coach is supposed to do when they have stars, big stars, on the team. As you said, hard work is what separates the men from the boys, and what makes a truly big star. Do you have a problem when there is a big star already coming to your team? To give you an example, Chicago Bulls, Dennis Rodman. Phil Jackson explained to the other players, that a problem or troublemaker like him can be also very beneficial for the team or to the team. He explained this using this parable that each Red Indian tribe has a warrior that walks backwards. But he had to explain, obviously, various rules to Dennis Rodman. But is this the way? Is this the approach that you actually adopt when working with big stars? Well, yes, certainly. If I can make a pick between A or B, I will definitely take into account whether the person is or is not a troublemaker. It's true to say that the troublemakers very often are those ones who make the difference between a good team and the best team. But if it's a winning team, then the troublemaker is accepted. Very often, if the team is losing, the troublemaker is the scapegoat. So it's quite risky. So, yeah, you can explain things, you can explain the limits, but this can hit back like a boomerang if a failure comes. So if things work, we are successful, all right, we've got 20 rebounds from this guy, no problem. But if there's a problem, the explanation simply doesn't work. So when I pick my players, I try to get those ones that will not be troublemakers in the team, rather team leaders or those ones that can support the team. But it's clear that it's not always my choice. Not always is it my choice. And if I get a troublemaker on the team, that's probably the biggest task, the biggest challenge to eliminate the bad habits, shall we say, and those things that these big stars sometimes are very fond of, in order not to let the team go down. The whole business of being a coach is not just, it does not consist in just, picking the right types of exercise, this and that, for the session. It's about psychiatry, it's about psychology. You just come to the practice, you look in their faces, you can see this one is angry, this one didn't sleep well. You try to eliminate the bad moments, the bad aspects, and you try to boost and work with those things that are positive about them, be it in the practice or in the game. So that, I believe, is the most important thing that works in our coaching life. Talking about exercises and, playing systems, games, yeah, you can read that, you can study that, that's on the web. The rest is not. All right, one more question concerning how you pick your players for the team. Do you have the last say in picking your player, or is it the management of the team, or has it ever happened that you had to push your own idea? Well, I try to be, and also vis-à-vis the management of the team, I try to be on a friendly basis, and I don't want to go hard, really, or go too hard. The managers won't like me if I want to have the last say each time I pick a player. Yeah, there are conflicts, or mini conflicts, if you like, but it's all about cooperating, collaborating. And of course, I can say I'd like to have this player, but I need to understand that sometimes the club is simply not able to buy that player simply because we don't have the money to do it. But if I have the chance, I pick the players. If not, then I have to work with what I have. I need to be able to work with those ones that have been picked for me. Next question. I'd like to ask you this. You are in the main leagues, and you are down, in the middle of the season. And what's your routine? Because you fly, you go out, you go back. Do you prefer having something light to play during the practice, or is it still the same level, the same physical level of demand? if you combine it down in the middle of the season when you have the regular games plus some cups, etc., it's the biggest problem that you need to deal with, I believe, because you have physical fatigue, also mental tiredness as well. Usually Monday and Tuesday would be the days for the tactical stuff. In the morning you would do shooting and tactical exercises, tactical drills. When we return, then Thursday and Friday can be added for the practice days, and Sunday and Saturday and Sunday would be the game days. And essentially what we do on Thursday afternoon and Friday morning is still can be absorbed, and the rest of it would be probably tactical sessions. Monday and Tuesday. It's difficult though. It is difficult. You need to realize that we also put in 2 gym sessions during each week, and towards the end of the season there'll be less practices, and we try to make them shorter but more intensive, because the concentration levels go down, obviously, and for the session to have any effect on them, you need to shorten the practice. So it's definitely not more than 90 minutes each.
Let me ask you, when doing some psychological work or dealing with those top Euroleague players, and what are the methods that you apply in addition to training or basketball methods? Do the players live by themselves alone or in groups, or do you organize their basketball life? Do they organize the basketball life themselves? Well, each of them has her own apartment, 99.99% of them, and so they actually protect their private life. And I myself never organize the private life outside basketball sphere. No, I don't do that. From time to time, I may have some stupid questions. Do you want to go out somewhere? Well, yeah, they respond, well, we should go to play some bowling game, or I don't know where. And so I want actually to be able to get them to, but I want to get them unforcibly. I never choose any forcible methods. And so I try also to make use of my contact with the team leaders, and they are the ones to put the basic these ideas in their minds, and they have to be convinced that it has been their own idea actually, and it's their own solution. But I don't care what they think. I don't need to know actually, because they shouldn't have the feeling that they have been directed by someone, mainly not by me. Let me follow up to the microcycle of the two game frequency, 2 game in a week, because there may be more here who play just 1 game a week. So it's my first question: when you have the 1 game microcycle, and so what is the intensity of training and practicing and its focus? And now, second question: do you regard as your advantage or disadvantage of that there is a relatively smaller level of the Czech ladies top competition, and you win by a margin, always by a high margin? So I think it can be an inspiration that you increase the coaching or training actually burden. But having the experience playing with excellent European teams might be good. So my colleague could tell you how it is that when they play on Wednesdays and they have difficult matches and games and play Wednesdays. So maybe he would like to share his own experience. But I have an experience from coaching for years that there should be a stronger or tougher match on Wednesday and a weaker one on Saturdays. And in those days, we had only 1 match in a team, so I made some models. Mondays, Tuesdays, there was the bulk of physical conditioning, combined with some, let's say, loose Wednesday programs and tune-up on tactical tune-up, on Thursdays and Fridays for the Saturday games. And so there was a actual larger leeway for me to do the conditioning, physical conditioning during the seasons, and I tried to use it for developing the skills. But if you have a 2-game frequency, 2 games in a week, so you have no time actually to develop the physical skills. So you have to just to keep the achieved levels. Next questions: when will there be the decisive moment when a coach grows out of a player? Or when a player becomes a coach. So we know that there are people who long for that career from the early days and not playing any top competition, these type of players, but they are convinced that they would become actually top coaches. But on the other hand, they can be top basketball players, and they start to talk her into doing something. You should do this, you should do that. So could you describe such differences? My own story, life story, was that I never wanted to work as a coach. I never thought about that even. But when I was getting to an end of my player's career, I realized that I had some experience, or actually many pieces of experience. I started to coach children at that time, and I found out that I enjoyed that. But I found out not only by coaching children, but in the coaching sessions I gave advice to junior players. So I had a feeling that actually I had something to share. So somebody wants to be a teacher, somebody wants to be a coach, and so people have to realize themselves what they want to be. So it's not about talking someone into doing something because you are an excellent player, you will be an excellent coach. It doesn't work like that. And it's not written, and it doesn't stand anywhere, that you can have many experience and knowledge, and so, but it may not work because you don't have the, let's say, teaching talent, if you don't have that teaching talent. So I don't know where the decisive, let's say, factor is, but it should come from the inside of a person, that I'm convinced, yes, I can give to people, share with people what I have inside, my experience, and I know how to render such experience, and my neighbors can have their own, can make actually guess whether I can do that really or not. So it's important that moment to realize there are no schools. It's not about schools. It's about feelings and emotions mostly. And if I'm to characterize myself as a coach, then, well, having some kind of a feeling that may have played a decisive role, an enormous role. Other questions? Let me come back to the coaching sessions during the game season, so frequency. If you actually advocate the theory of compensating the load on players, those with the highest loads and those that didn't play at all, actually, whether you can divide the coaching session actually in two parts or pieces among these and those players. Well, it is not like that. But what happens is that those with enormous load have no practicing session at all if they are overloaded. And if I am to look around, those that didn't play in previous game, that there should be more intensive conditioning and training, and so and the others should go biking, etc. So, but it's not happen. It shouldn't happen actually that I am to chore here like mad, but then you can lie on a couch. But it's not like that. At a higher level, they realize, yes, when I want to go out I have to actually attend the training session. Sometimes maybe complicated, but sometimes it gets tough when players start to actually support themselves with negative things. But yes, they should understand that I didn't play yesterday, so I have to take the whole practicing session. Any questions? Any other questions? We've been talking now about players. And let me ask about the whole team around, actually the group of people around the team itself. So what is the role of assistants in such big teams? What is the division of responsibilities? 99.9% of all my career experience, I've had an assistant coach, much younger than myself, and I'm proud to say that the assistant coaches then over some time became head coaches with a very good career. What I've tried to do, not only the assistant coaches, the whole actually implementing team, that it should consist of the best people that I can get. I'm not the type of person that I select only people, let's say, at mediocre level, and I should be the best. No, it's not that case. The better people I have, the better work they can do for me, special work, I mean. So the better, of course, if I have a chance to hire a psychologist or a doctor, I would do that, of course. Certainly, the best people should be incorporated in the team. So the better assistant coach, the better performance of the team. But it's not always like that, but it should be like that. Let me ask you, how do you actually deal with scouting before the game season? And how do you select players, individual? Do you differentiate between Czech players, Euroleague players? So how do you divide your energy into these various activities? Well, this is one of the most components of what you do, and the players are used to that. They need to have be given such let's say service. I do not want them to be burdened by spending a lot of time looking at watching some videos, viewing some videos. I have a so-called service for that, service support, but I don't like to do it myself. I have other people to do this job for me. I just say what I want, piece by piece and item by item, and then the players get some 15 minutes. They should, the individual, they get an analysis of the most important, let's say, points that should be in the game plan of a team. And so I do not want players to get information about 15 events and they don't remember anything. And it makes also a difference whether it's domestic league or whether it's a Euroleague. Scouting work is much more, let's say, elaborate or detailed in Euroleague. 1 to 100, let's say, ratio. In the Czech league, it's that we say just a few words about individual players, and then we want to actually push through ourselves. But in Euroleague, it's maybe different, because 2 days before a Euroleague match game, they get elaborated information and some plan what they should do 2 days before, and so it's a sufficient part of functioning of the team. Next question. Let me ask about the role of psychologists, because the mental conditioning is very important. And you said that if you could, you would hire a psychologist in your team. So when you said that, I suppose that you don't have psychologists. You have to play the role of psychologist yourself. And now in a situation the team is not working well, is on a losing streak, and is somewhere at the bottom of the table. So what do you now? What could you advise, to others, what they should do, what to do in such situations? Well, what matters is whether we have been losing and why. We are physically down, or I have no good player types or player characters. You can have many injured players. There are many factors, but I have not been on a really big losing streak so far, knock wood, but I'm just joking, I'm just kidding. Well, you have to analyze why this is so, and you have to try to correct things. But if you have injured players, you can't do much about that. If you have some problems in their private lives, you have to deal with that, because these are girls who can have problems, and so you have to try to sort it out, and you have to get to the causes, the roots, why this or that has happened. And so I have to actually use my lifelong experience to act as a psychologist. I should never repeat that in my life. So I actually I fixed this in my mind, and so well I would take a piece of that coach, a piece of other coach. Another question: did you ever want to coach a men's team? And have you got any offer to be coach of a men's team? Well, this is the most frequent journalist question. I've never coached boys in my life, and I will not do so in future. Yes, but I got some serious offer to do so. It was a top Slovak league. I was asked to be a coach, to train men, to be a coach of men's teams. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. No, but it was meant quite seriously. But I don't think I would be able to do that.
Okay, what's the difference between coaching your club and the national team? What do you think would be the specific differences between the two? Well, first of all, you've got 6 months, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months to work with the national team, while you spend the whole season with the club. So you have more influence, more time to influence things. You pick the players that you can have. For the major part, for instance, when I was the head coach of the Slovak national team, we had a problem to find 12 players, the worst thing, the nightmare about it was to pick the 12. But the biggest difference is in the time you spend, how long you spend with your team. Because making things happen in 6 weeks is very difficult. I prefer working on a long-term basis with the team. It gives me more time to make things happen than just within the short period of 6 weeks. The question over there?
The American coaches are more successful than European coaches. What is the cause of this? Is it that they give the players more fantasy, and a European coach does over-organize the game, or the American players are more dynamic, they can give more fantasy to the game? What is really the difference that the American system is more successful than the European system?
If I had 5 American players on the pitch, I would be in trouble. I would have a problem with it because I like the maybe European style basketball that is perhaps inventional without, too much pre-planned type of playing, or without a great deal of individualism. US players certainly bring self-confidence to the team. They definitely bring individual skills, technical skills, game skills. They are simply big personalities for the most part, and these are the ones that I want for my team. And when you ask me which player would I like to have, Taurasi actually would be one of them, and she is a great mix of the US qualities, I would say, of players, plus some deeply instilled, I would say, ability to speculate, in inverted commas, in the European way. So these would be the players that I would actually want to bring with me, whichever team I'm coaching. The individualism, high level of skills, plus the self-confidence. Next question. Can I go back to individualism or individuality of the US players? The American players seem to be born and raised in this manner. Do you prefer a player that would be more perhaps able to adjust to the collective type of the game, or who would stay individual? Well, there are sometimes problems with this because the American players being raised with a big level of self-confidence and individual skills. They don't have the problem of feeling down ever like we do. But sometimes they are too individual, being too individualistic in that, it's difficult to explain to them that, there are two players outside that she could pass the ball to, and she doesn't. Sometimes it happens in home teams. The Czech girls, the Czechoslovak girls don't like the idea of that player not wanting to pass the ball to them, but they don't understand that this is simply down to the mentality, the mental approach of these US players. But sometimes it is a problem, that's right. Next question, Tomáš Šmoula. Tomáš is still fondling with the paper. What list of questions? I wanted to ask about junior basketball. Spain, Czech Republic, we saw that game yesterday. You did coach in Spain, and what are the differences in, let's say, preparation in junior levels? Well, most definitely they have a larger basis. They have a great pool of players to choose from. And I don't know exactly how things are going there, whether they spend, the day having 2 practices a day or what, just one session, I don't know. It also depends on the club in terms of how they go about creating good conditions. That may be the case of Valencia. It's definitely not the case of the smaller clubs. I'm really not well placed to talk about it, but the big difference I could see yesterday would be in individual skills between what the Spanish players could do and what our players could do. The most interesting aspect about it, let me put it this way, was that already in this category the Spanish players could defend very, very aggressively, but not with their hands. That's one of the biggest differences I can see between our defense, or Czech or Slovak defense, and the Spanish defense. And that obviously sort of translates or seeps through to the higher categories then, higher levels. Tom, over to you. Been playing with this list of questions. Yeah, let me go for the rest of these. You have experience across Europe from many countries with many clubs. Can you give us an insight into what the differences are between the clubs, and have you ever had to adjust your coaching approach to these differences? Well, these were different countries. That's one aspect. Apart from that, you need to realize that these were teams that had very different ambitions, each of them, different histories, etc. When I worked in Hungary, my contract was for 3 years, and we were building the team. I got young players, and we were only building a new team that was meant to be completely different than the previous ones. And the management tolerated, not great results, shall we say. So the team was following my idea of how we should go about things. After Hungary, my contract was in Russia. That was a different story. I got a team with stars, and the ambition was to win as soon as possible the National League and the Euroleague as well. So Hungary was very nice for me as a coach because I was able to work in a way that suited me. It was also a nice experience because for the very first time, I worked in a foreign country and I had to work in English as my official language, as my working language. It was funny because I was talking English to me, Slovak, to Hungarian girls. On both sides we were kind of struggling at times, but it was nice. Then I switched to Russia, and the Russian players, apart from having the goal set for them of scoring the highest successes possible, and they lived in luxury, including having their own chauffeurs who drove them to the place, to the practice, and then back home. A service that you would like, or the level of service you would like for yourself, you can't really imagine. And in a city where, when you go downtown, you don't know if it takes 30 minutes or 4 hours. So these are different things. So you need to realize that often it happens that the chauffeur told me, the girls went to a club and then they spent the whole night there, so they'd be late for the practice. Big differences. It is also a big difference if you live in a Hungarian city with the population of 60,000, and if the height of the player is 195 centimeters, anybody can see her out in the street. But in Moscow, with a population of 20, maybe 25 million, and the girls spend 2 hours just getting downtown, they simply can very easily get lost in that. They can disappear, they can hide away. That's part of life. All right, next question. 2 games a day, big stars in the team, Final Four on one hand. On the other hand, you want to develop the player as an individual player. Is it really possible? Is it possible at all in the microcycle of 2 games a week, with practices in between, with traveling between, shifting between time zones and all the rest of it? It's very difficult. It's very difficult, and leaving the rhythm apart, the team rhythm apart, there are individual practices as well, individual practice sessions. Palau is 34 now, and when she says she has nothing to develop, in that case, she's useless for the team because she has no longer any ambitions to improve. Once the player thinks she knows everything, that's bad. And you should thank her and let her leave, or persuade her this is not the case. So within that microcycle that you described, I always try to find time for individual work. Sometimes all it takes is 20 minutes before the practice or after the practice. And it's about improving, but also about the knowledge that she did something extra for herself, for her individual skills. That can be very useful in the game. And that's very often what actually makes the difference in the game. It happened this season to me that one of the best players, Kiavon, right in the middle of the season, I took her aside 10 minutes after the practice, and we did a little bit of work under the basket, and she came after the practice and said, well, thank you, coach, I sort of forgot about this. So it can be 10-15 minutes on an individual basis, one-on-one with the coach, and they will then bring it back to the season, bring it back to the team in the season.
We are getting to the end. Tom, do you still have something on your list of questions? I'll take the last one, relating to the coaching or practicing process leading. How to teach 14 or 15-year-old girls to be aggressive in practicing when there's a factor of being pals and the 2 friends do not want to hurt each other. They don't want to be aggressive. Well, you should take respect to whether they are friends or not, pals or not. unfortunately, not only in practicing sessions, but if you're looking at some games, the idea of them, the concept of them, to play aggressive is that they are 2 meters distant from the opponent. So there's some small mistakes somewhere, but it's difficult to say, to answer. I would take actually no regard to this, whether they are pels or not. But the other way around, if they are pels, they should actually be aggressive against each other to be the best. Any other questions from the audience? I have still one. You did many interviews, many such discussions actually. Is there a question which has not been raised so far in those discussions and you wonder that nobody asked? I don't. I think that mostly coaches actually raise the same questions like you did. And I keep on saying that what is most important in our coaching work is to be able to organize things properly and to actually be able to take the best elements, the factors, and to be actually able to decide about that themselves. That's my priority, and of course there should be a correct priority, correctly. So, but I'm not able to tell you what is most important and what not. But like I say, it's kind of a feeling that you have. Well, and no other questions. So in the very conclusion, before we go apart, there were some questions. Which of those questions was most interesting for you? Why do I ask? Because there's a small gift that Tomáš has prepared for that person who raised that question. So these are some special things that have been chosen. So please give it a thought. Yes, Peter, it's yours. This is my deep thought. Well, there was a magnificent question that came from you. When did I find out that I should become a coach? That was the question. Well, I have a few minor gifts for Prague. In conclusion, I'd like to thank for Michal Ježdík for hosting this session perfectly, you for many interesting questions, and of course I'd like to thank very, very much Mrs. Hejkova for attending our coaches clinic, for her interesting answers to questions which can be an inspiration for you, and I would like to wish her much success and good luck in the next games, maybe Euroleague title also with USK Prague, and happy trip back to Prague. Thank you very much.